we lived really close to a Hollywood Video, and so I just started having my parents rent out like as many horror movies as they like the store would let them, and I started watching them just desensitize myself and get like a little bit more used to it.
Yeah.
And the speed I went from being like terrified of it to being absolutely in love with it was so fast, and just not something I expected.
We're back with the Indie Magazine podcast. Today we're talking with Lakota Ruby-Eck, a director of photography, DP, and cinematographer based in New York. I think a really interesting conversation for those interested in the work of a DP and cinematographer.
Stick around after as we discuss Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
All right, Lakota Ruby-Eck, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, you are calling in from New York, East Coast?
Yeah, Albany, New York.
Albany, New York. Have you grown up there? Have you always lived there?
Yeah, I grew up in Albany. I lived in New York City for a year doing film. And when I lived there, I was not getting a ton of work because I didn't have any connections or anything.
Gotcha.
And I moved back to Albany because I was like, oh, I'm not making any money out here. And 2 days after I moved back to Albany, I started getting an influx of people trying to hire me from the city. But luckily I had enough work here that I was like, I'm just going to stick here and I'll travel back to the city because it's way cheaper to live in Albany than it was to live in New York City.
I bet, yeah. Maybe just a little cheaper on the rent. How far of a commute is it between Albany and New York City, just for those who don't know?
It's about 2.5 hours.
Okay.
And when you do film freelancing, 2.5 hour drive is pretty nice. I've done drives a lot that are like 5 to 6 hours.
Oh my gosh. That's pretty crazy. I guess before we get into too much, let's start with just your name, because I know the listeners are going to wonder, my fiance wondered, Lakota Ruby-Eck, where does that come from, or what's the background there?
So Lakota is Native American in origin. I'm not Native American. My parents were hippies and they just really liked the name. To my knowledge, it means friendly. And Ruby is English and Eck is German. So my mom, her last name is Ruby, and my dad's last name is Eck. And
that's still a good story. Hippies.
Yeah.
I saw the hyphenated last name. I only have a couple friends who have that, and I was like, I'm guessing that's maiden and father's last name. So
yeah, 100%. And my middle name is Elias. So I think Elias is Greek. So I've got a real mixed bag of a name from all sorts of different cultures.
All your bases covered, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So growing up in Albany, were you around film and television some, or how did you first get interested in doing this as a career?
Getting interested to do it as a career was, I think I had a bit of a weird path of getting into it. When I was growing up, all through high school, I really wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. That was like, I don't know why, it was just one of the few things I really wanted to do. So I was taking photography classes, and my high school accidentally put me in a video class, and something with the administration that year, this was one of the only years, at least that while I was there, while this was the case, you couldn't change classes in the first week of school, even if they put you in a wrong class. So I just had to take a video class for a week. And I was like, this is amazing. And growing up, I was a huge TV kid. I loved TV shows. I loved movies. I love everything. And it was, even with it, obviously the first week was instrumental, but even a day or two in, I was like, how was this never a thought to me? Why did I never think that this was a thing I could get into? And I was interested in it, but I wasn't so driven to be a part of it for probably 4 or 5 years after that. I was still setting up my life to be around that, but what really pushed me to do it was this guy I went to college with. His name's Micah. I still work with him today. I had lost touch with him for a little bit after college and then reconnected with him. And he knew this guy, Gary, who had been in the industry for a long time, and he was taking a bit of a break away from it. And in the interim of taking that break, he wanted to try to impart as much knowledge on the industry as he could to people who were interested in doing it. And so Micah was making short after short. I think the first probably like 12 shorts I ever worked on were all Micah shorts. And
Wow.
Gary was involved in some way, shape, or form and taught me how to be an AC. And after that, I started getting jobs and such on my own. And the more and more I did it, the more and more I was like, this is what I want to do, like working in film. And at the time, I didn't care so much about what the path I was working in film. I was just, I want to be on sets. I want to do this. I want to do it with friends, like especially. I think that's one of the best parts of filmmaking is when you get to work with friends.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until a few years later that I got so much into the cinematography side of things. But it was a very long path before I finally really fully threw myself into it. And even pre-pandemic, I was still focused on it, but I hadn't become 100%. I was like maybe 80% invested in it. And then during the pandemic, I was like, when everything slowed down, I was like, there's no reason for me to not just throw my whole self into this thing that I love. I'm so surrounded by it. I know so many people. It would just be foolish not to take a chance on this.
Yeah. I was going to ask, I know some people listening are in the industry, others are interested in getting into it. Can you delineate each of the roles that you had on set before getting the cinematographer? You mentioned AC, assistant cameraman, right?
Yeah, I actually, the first two shorts I was ever on, I was a stills photographer because I had a camera. I had bought a camera because I had been interested in potentially directing, and I didn't know anyone. So it was like if I was going to direct things, I had to shoot it myself. So I had made a couple small things by myself that are long hidden away from the internet because quality and such. But so I had a camera, and he was like, we'd love to have someone to take stills photos. And as I was doing that, the camera guy was like, I need a hand. Would you mind helping me out? Like, you clearly know cameras to some degree. And I started learning more about ACing there. And I started doing it more and more. I got really lucky. I think a lot of people who want to get into film, usually their first role on a set is being a PA. I've never, ever PA'd in the entire time of being on set. Through knowing Gary and other people, one of my best friends who lives in the city is also a decades-long AC. And anytime I had any questions, he was able to impart knowledge on me. So I was really lucky to just jump straight in to ACing. And through watching that, I got into cinematography and started shooting. But it was only until a few years ago where cinematography really became the sole thing. I also gaffed along the way, working with the DP to decide like what the lighting setups for each thing is. And I still do that from time to time. I really enjoy it, especially like with working in film. I think it's good to have some range of knowledge of what other roles do on set. So working in another role sometimes is good. And especially if it's a role that's a support role to a role that you already do, because you can learn so much from other people who do it, like sitting on the outside looking in, even if you've already been on the inside for so long. There's so much to gain from other people's ways of thinking about doing things and stuff. So I do still really enjoy gaffing when I get the chance.
Yeah, I noticed on your credits on your website and on IMDb, you're also assistant director on some films. Is that right? Or some short films?
Yes. Yeah. That was, both of those were weird situations. With the first one was for a Christmas movie that I was actually shooting as well. And I had been on enough sets that I just knew how to make them run better. Because if you are working on a set with more than like a handful of people and you don't have an assistant director, it's so hard to organize anything or exactly. Yeah. And so just from having been around assistant directors already so much and from being on set so much, I could see that we needed someone to better structure days as we were going. And so I stepped into that role. And once the short was over, the director was just like, hey, is it okay if we give you an assistant director credit? Because you were pretty instrumental in helping this thing flow well. So I was like, okay, awesome. That's great. And later on, the second one that I did, it was a horror short called When You're Gone. And I had the woman, Kristen, who was directing it. I've worked with her as an actor many times. I've never filmed her, but a lot of things I AC'd, she was an actress on, and we both have a really deep love of horror movies, and she knew that I loved horror movies and had known that I had a little bit of assistant directing experience, and she was starring in the movie as well as directing it. And so she was like, I really need someone who cares about horror movies, knows how a set is going to be structured and run. And I think that you, even though this isn't your goal or a thing that you do a lot, I think you would be perfect for this. And me and the production designer for a lot of it was really cool to be able to like sit down with other people on set and find ways to make the short work, because the way that it was one of the weirdest structured shorts that I've ever worked on, from a standpoint of like, there's like a lot of scenes where she's stuck in like this like goo pod on a wall while monsters are like in a room around her and like things are happening. And so there's 3 or 4 scenes in a row where this is happening, and each scene she has to have different reactions to what's going on, but there's obviously nothing going on in front of her because we had to like build a thing laying on the ground. So even though it looked like she was attached to a wall sideways, she was really laying down in this goo pot. And so we had to like find interesting ways to help her get the reactions she was looking for and stuff. And she's a phenomenal actress and had so much of it planned out ahead of time. So it was just like having us being there, making sure that all of it was adhered to. And it was a really, honestly, one of my favorite experiences ever being on a set. So I'm glad that you asked about that movie. We got to work with a guy who, do you know Too Many Cooks, the Adult Swim?
No.
It was like this, it's like an 11-minute video where they made like a Full House style intro, but after the first minute it devolves into like insanity, but it keeps being the intro, but they just keep introducing character after character, and it's like 100 characters, and they start being like monsters and all this other stuff. And the guy who did all the special effects for it did the special effects on that short. So getting to work with that guy and like hear stories about that. He also worked on Mandy by Panos Cosmatos. He did the Cheddar Goblin. Yeah, he was the guy who did Cheddar Goblin and stuff. So it was so cool being able to work with someone who worked on all these projects that I loved and had all these weird stories and stuff about it.
That's fun. Yeah, so you're getting credits in different areas and getting experiences with good actors or memorable movies or things that maybe you didn't have the experience on before. Has any of this changed what you're looking for down the road? Like maybe do you want to be AD or a producer or a director down the road, or do you think it's just solidified you love doing cinematography while knowing about the rest of them?
A bit of both. I definitely, the more and more I do cinematography, I know that's the absolute number one thing that I would like to focus on. But I have had a little bit of the directing bug. I think it's really hard not to get that on a set. Yeah. You know, you just see people bringing their visions to life and you're like, I want to do that too. Even if you don't necessarily have the most creative mind, if you work on enough sets, you find yourself suddenly like thinking of stories, and whether you want to or not. I've never, anytime I've ever tried to come up with a story, it's never come to me in that moment, but there'll be other times where I'm just like washing dishes and out of nowhere, an entire story, like front start to finish, every story beat will come to me, and maybe it'll change over time if I'm like, oh, this seems like it would work a little bit better. But I always think it's funny, like how inspiration strikes like that, at least for me, and how much it's not really like, even when I've tried to flex the muscle of like getting better at it, it never, like I can't just sit down and come up with ideas. But because I love horror so much, I actually haven't had a ton of chances to work in horror as a cinematographer. So it's been a hand-in-hand thing where I want to direct, but part of it is because I just want to do more horror stuff. And if I start directing and making my own stuff, it will give me the chance to shoot more of the things that I want to shoot. I think you hear that a lot in film, is like people who get into it, they're like, I got into it because I want to see, I want to make things that I want to see, and I'm not necessarily seeing them. And so I think that sort of route is a really good way to give that to yourself.
Yeah, one of the episodes we had in January, February, there was an actress who was a neuroscience major at school and then dropped out to continue to pursue acting. And she talked about the same thing of she had to write her own stuff if she didn't want to just be the bubbly Beach Girl or whatever, the Forever Girlfriend #3. She had to write and do her own things and ended up founding her own production company for the same reason that you're saying, of finding that own space to make what you want to be seen in. I know you have your own production company. Is that right?
Yes.
What led you to do that? Is it this desire to make shorts later, or is it just a budgeting issue on set, or?
It didn't, even though it started out as a quote unquote production company, it was more so a way to just give myself a space to show my work. A lot of the stuff that I've posted about aren't things that are my production company, but since it's my brand, I've talked to people who I've worked with and they're okay with me posting that stuff. I've had some people that are like, we would prefer you not to. So I've never posted any of that sort of stuff related to it on that page. But as time has gone on, and from being on sets for so much and understanding how they work, I've had a couple people approach me about helping them produce shorts. And we actually just had the very first quote unquote official short. I've done a handful of music videos beforehand, which I love doing music videos, but obviously the main goal is narrative work. But the very first quote unquote official Toon Pictures short, Christmas Cheer, released on Christmas this year.
Oh, and nice.
With this local director, Alex Mabry, who he had made some stuff like with his phone for funsies on Instagram and stuff before, but never actually like sat down to make a short, to my knowledge. I might get a text from him being like, I've done it before. But, and part of, this isn't necessarily so much of the goal as a whole of Toon Pictures, but one of the things with that project specifically, with Alex not having a ton of experience directing a short for himself, I knew a lot of people who were really interested in getting either into film as a whole or getting into certain roles that they've been wanting to get into, but they haven't had the experience to do it. So I wanted to give a space where all of these people who were interested in these roles had a chance to do that sort of thing. So both makeup artists on it had, one of them I had actually gotten onto a music video before, but she hadn't been on anything prior to that, and so this was her second thing. And the other makeup artist had been, she would just in her home doing special effects all the time and really wanted to make the jump into actually making something. And I had happened to meet her through a company that I had worked with before, and he was like, I don't know if you have anything for her ever, but please keep her in mind. And so I reached out to her and brought her on. Our AC, he had PA'd a lot and he was really interested in ACing, and I had just recently worked on a feature maybe 4 or 5 months ago beforehand with him. He was a PA and I was first ACing it. I was doing more of the first ACing, but that was my main role. And so I reached out to him and was like, hey, if you want this chance to do that. And now I've actually, him specifically, I've used him on probably the last year or so of projects that I've done. And through helping him gain credits and stuff, he's even moved on to getting AC roles outside of projects with me and stuff now. So it's really nice to see that sort of thing bear fruit.
Yes, passing it on like you had some mentorship or help at the beginning when you were in college and passing it on to others. That's awesome.
Yes, exactly. And also the area that I'm in, there's a community network called the 518 Film Network that started about a year ago. And a huge part of it is connecting filmmakers and helping people who are interested in getting involved. And I've recently been involved in an intermediary board of helping it become larger and stuff. So it was really cool to use both the network to bring people in, but also help the network build out more and have more people who are interested in film actually getting a chance to work on projects. I think that's a really important thing, is if you enjoy doing that, like, is imparting knowledge on people who are interested in stuff. There's so many people who don't get a chance to go to film school, don't get a chance to even find a community that can support them. I've worked on movies in different states and I talked to them about this and they're like, I can't believe that's a thing where you live. I wish there was a community like that in my area and stuff. So we're really hoping that in time people will see what we're doing and maybe try to do this in their own area.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of people in different states and many mention it's a Facebook group where it's a last minute request form of, I need a PA tomorrow for this much money. Okay, here you go. But that sounds invaluable to what you guys are building up there, because it creates that community, like you're saying, where it's less just competitive and more collaborative of, you like them, try this out. You don't have experience, get over here. So that sounds great.
Yeah, it's truly just an invaluable thing, I think.
Yeah. I want to backtrack a little bit to cinematography because I realize we haven't talked much about the nuts and bolts of it. I think when I've seen movies with friends, we have discussions about it. A lot of times someone will bring up, oh, the cinematography was great. And you'll ask them what that means. They're like, oh, the CGI and the lighting and the set and the composition and all of it. Can you maybe explain what cinematography looks like to you and what aspects you touch the most of a shot or the look of the movie?
I think cinematography is, to me, obviously an incredibly important part of the movie.
Yeah.
It's one of the core parts. You can't have a movie without cinematography in some way, shape, or form. I think that it's really interesting, and this is the case with a lot of factors in a film, but I find cinematography maybe a little bit more than others because there's just so much to go into it, but it can be both incredibly technical and incredibly expressive at the same time. There's a lot of art that still goes into it and a lot of feeling that you have to imbue in it for it to be successful.
Yeah.
And when it comes to projects, I've had a huge range of experiences of like what a director is looking for me. Sometimes you work on a project with a director who has a really singular vision and they're not looking for any input whatsoever. They just want you to show up. They want you to light it. They want you to shoot it exactly how they want to shoot it. And then you go home and you're like, cool, I did a really good thing. But then other times you work with directors who are like, you've been doing this for such a long time. You clearly have invaluable insight. I'd love, if you ever think of an idea that you think would be integral to telling the story better and stuff, please offer that opinion up.
Yeah.
And I think that every job is so different. So it's so hard to really pin down the heart of cinematography because it can just be so different from project to project. I think you have to do a lot of research. There's a lot of learning that goes into it. And every time you're like, oh, I've got a handle on this, you'll be on a set and some new thing will come up and you're like, maybe I don't have as much of a handle on this as I thought I did. But I think in a way that's the fun of it. You know, there's never, you can't, what's the term? Rest on your laurels. You can't just expect that no matter what, you're going to be able to handle every situation that's thrown at you lackadaisically. Like you're always thinking on your feet. You're always trying to, and not only, even if you like find a way where like this way works and it works really well in almost every situation that I can use it in, that kind of takes some of the fun out of it. Sometimes when you are thrown the same exact situation, it's like, how else can I approach this in a different way that still is just as successful as the way that I approached it before, but it feels different to me. I've shot so much at this point. Like I think I've probably shot around 30 short films. I've shot 3 features. So I've been in the same situations over and over. You're shooting people talking in a car. You're shooting people talking at a party. And there's just ways that you've got to find ways to make it interesting for yourself and for others. Yeah. I think it's also such a community-driven thing, as with all of film. So who you work with can change your style in ways that you don't necessarily notice until you're really working with them for a while. And I think that can be really cool as well. Meaning like gaffers and such, like other technical people.
Yeah, I feel like the more I've talked to folks, a lot of times it's the movie magic, and then suddenly afterwards you realize it still is a job, and it could become rote if you're not doing what you're talking about. Finding something to keep you engaged and something to stay interested in every time you're on set. Just for my own knowledge and anybody else, what's the hierarchy like within the camera department, cinematography, DP, just so everyone knows who you would report to, who reports to you, and also who are you working the most with? Are you going straight to the director? Is this going to somebody else or otherwise?
I usually, you go straight to the director. I know that on much larger stuff, like Marvel level movies and stuff, which I'm certainly nowhere near that stuff, those lines become a little bit blurred. But usually I have directors, producers, and such above me. And then people who report to me are the gaffer, and then usually any of the camera team, ACs, camera PAs and stuff. There's obviously other people on the G&E team, but usually they more so report to the gaffer than they would to me. There's little bits and pieces here and there where it's like, if you need a stand, you can ask a grip and the grip will get it for you, but it's not really, that's such a small beans thing. And usually the first person I go to is a director, but the higher you get in the larger projects that you work on, you have to be able to have communication with other people involved. You have to talk to costume designers leading up to things. You have to talk to production designers just to make sure that everyone's vision is on the same page as the director. Make sure, like, you know, if you aren't ready with knowing what the costumes are going to look like, there's times where you can come in with lighting technique and it's not going to agree with those costumes.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those things where it's like, you can think you understand cinematography, and then you get to set and this one random thing, someone has like a reflective material that you've never run into, and a huge problem that you got.
How do you prepare for a shoot? Are you obviously checking your equipment, but are you also reading the script and making tons of notes or things you might see that would be problematic? Like, what does that look like before you get to set the first day?
I find this is another thing it depends on who the person is, but I love homework. That kind of homework. I love reading a script. I love when a thing that is always really nice, because it doesn't always happen, is when a director comes to you, gives you the script, has you read it, and says, how long do you think this is going to take? Like, from your expertise.
Wow.
Because I've done it a lot. And there's been times when people come to me and they're like, oh, this short film's going to be a 4-day shoot. And I read the script and I'm like, there's no feasible way you're going to make this in less than 7 days. And they're like, oh, it's going to be 4 days. Trust me, we can do it. And then we get to the end of the 4th day and they're like, I think it's going to be more days. And I'm like, I know, I told you. But I'll probably read a script 5 or 6 times. I go over a shot. I always request, you don't always get them, but I always request storyboards, shot lists. If there's movies that people like, when they think about their movie and they're like, oh, I want my movie to look like this, I ask them to tell me what those movies are. If they have specific stills from the movie, to give them to me. And if they don't, I'll, depending on the size of the project, if it's a day-long thing, I might not necessarily do it, but if it's a few-day short film, I'll actually watch the whole movie to really get as much as I can from, like, what is it these people are looking for in their projects. And I know, again, like deciding with like the size of it, like if there's costume people, consulting with the costume people, if there's a production designer, consulting with the production designer, because as much information as you can know going into things, it's only going to make your job easier. I think that you can certainly still make a short film and have it be successful without doing legwork beforehand, but the chances of it being successful without doing that legwork are so much lower. It's all about preparation, and I think that if you're doing a disservice if you're not doing it.
That sounds like a major step, as you mentioned this, to go from I have a camera and I'm shooting things to I'm making something that I'd be proud of, or something that's going to fulfill the vision of the director. I think oftentimes we hear everyone can be a director or cinematographer. They have an iPhone, which is true to a point, I get. But what other steps or what other lessons did you learn early on that made the difference between we're shooting something and we're shooting what we want to be shooting?
Definitely, like I said, doing the work.
Yeah.
I think, and not even just doing the work in the sense of like doing the work for what needs to be done for the project itself, but learning things. You can have an iPhone or you can have the absolute best camera in the world, but if you don't know what you're doing, just because you have the best camera in the world doesn't mean what you shoot is going to be the best looking thing in the world. But if you know what you're doing and you have an iPhone, it can look really good. It's not about the equipment. And even like even outside of like knowing specific techniques, but even with the equipment itself, if you don't fundamentally understand the equipment that you're working with, it's not gonna be as impactful or successful as a project as you want it to be. Every lens has their own quirks. Every camera has their own quirks. If you know how much you can push a camera in either direction, whether into the darkest like type of shooting, like less lights or as many lights as possible, there's so many ways that things can go wrong. And that's just from cinematography too. There's sound people need to learn their stuff, production designers, like there's not a single role on set outside of maybe a PA that you can skate without having done work ahead of time.
Yeah. So being a student of your film before you even get to the set to shoot it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're not actively working, are you watching a ton of movies and TV shows? Are you taking screenshots? Are you pausing to look at things? How does that factor into your work?
In recent times, I've stopped watching things as much as I used to. I used to voraciously consume stuff, but the more and more I've done film, the more and more I've worked in it. So it's hard to sit in front of a screen so much.
Yeah.
But with that being said, through social media and other things, I follow so many different cinematography accounts, so many other film centric accounts. And I have on every app, pretty much, I have insanely huge folders of saved posts of stills and all sorts of things. I have a subscription to Shot Deck, which is a thing made by Lawrence. I think his name is Lawrence Scher. He shot Joker, but it's like the biggest database of high quality film stills anywhere. And if you're a cinematographer or you're a director, I think that's an invaluable tool. It's maybe like $100 a year. And if you're a cinematographer, that's going to pay off in a single job. And there's times where I'll have a couple hours of downtime here and there. And I'm like, what do I do right now? And I'll just go to Shot Deck's website and I'll just look through stills. Even if I have things that I want to practice cinematography wise, like exterior night shots and stuff, I'll just go and I'll make a massive folder of exterior shots where I'm like, I love what they did here. What can I take from this shot just from looking at it and what I know about cinematography already, and how can I apply that to my work and get better in what I do? I think that if you have downtime at any point, obviously take time for yourself and rest when you can. But I think that if, especially in freelancing, you have periods where you'll have like a month where you're not doing anything, you should still be taking that time to practice your craft in one way or another, whether it's having a camera in your hands or just looking at other people's work or trying to find ways to improve yourself in relation to your job.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, and on the same note, you've mentioned your love of horror and wanting to do more horror. Where did that come from? And what about that film style has really drawn you as a cinematographer?
As a kid, I was terrified of the dark. Like, it was a problem. It affected my sleep, and I never wanted to watch horror movies. I stayed as far away from them as possible. And in middle school, late middle school, I saw an episode of X-Files. I think it's called Humbug. And there's this creature called the Fiji mermaid that they're trying to track down. And I saw it with my parents, and I couldn't sleep for 3 days. And I was like, I need to do something about this because this is ridiculous. Yeah. Even at that age, I was like, I got to do something about this. And so we lived really close to a Hollywood Video. And so I just started having my parents rent out like as many horror movies as the store would let them. And I started watching them just desensitize myself and get like a little bit more used to it. Yeah. And the speed I went from being like terrified of it to being absolutely in love with it was so fast, and just not something I expected, especially like back then. One of the few, obviously there was Netflix and stuff, but we didn't have a Netflix account or anything. And one of the few ways you could watch movies besides like torrenting them and stuff is you could watch movies on YouTube in like different parts. Yeah. And I would watch so many horror movies that way. And just as time went on, I fell in love with the way so much of it is made. There's so much practical effects and stuff in it. And I think that like, even though it's not necessarily the most recognized genre by the Academy and stuff like that, that there's just so much artistic, technical skill that goes into it. And in more recent years, people have been significantly more willing to sing the praises of that sort of thing. But like, especially when I was a kid, people would be like, you like horror movies, those things are terrible. And it's like, guys, watch a horror movie, watch Pumpkinhead, like watch anything, watch The Thing. Like, these movies are marvels. It's incredible. And just the older and older I've gotten, the more it's stuck with me. Its ability to tell deep stories while also being, I don't want to say silly because that sounds reductive, but I mean it in like a complimentary way. Like, you can get really wacky and zany with a horror movie, but still have it be an impactful thing. And a lot of people are a fan of elevated horror type stuff nowadays. terms of like The Witch and stuff like that. But they make fun of the name of it. And I just don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, I think it's a really good way to categorize it. And I think it's just so cool how malleable of a genre it is. I think it's one of the most malleable genres by far.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying too about it's still not recognized in the Academy at all. There's not really a great film festival or award circuit that is paramount to the Gotham Awards or Indie Spirit or whatever else. But I do know that upper brass and leadership are taking note when you see James Wan or anybody else that's come from horror. James Gunn, they're now doing Marvel movies. They're heads of studios. They know how to shoot things in such a real, practical, and I wouldn't say dirty, but like a quick way, it seems. They know how to run a set. They do things on a good budget. So I hope definitely that it'll have a better standing and more people will be open to it. The more we see, here's our favorite director. What'd they start with? Oh, horror. There's got to be a reason they were there.
Peter Jackson, the Lord
Oh,
of the
yeah.
Rings.
Yeah.
All of his movies, his first like 3 movies were all horror movies.
Yep. There's definitely something there.
Especially like nowadays, there's some of the best horror movies coming out too. Like 2022, like pound for pound, 2022 was probably one of the best years in horror in probably, I don't know, 20 years. Like
Wow.
Usually you get eight. If you're lucky, you'll get like 8 to 10 really good horror movies a year. And 2022, there had to be like 25 or 30 of them. It was just like every other weekend, an amazing horror movie was coming out, or at least one that had cultural significance. Terrifier 2, Barbarian, Fresh. It's just the list is endless.
Yeah, it's definitely one I hope, to your point, get it at the Oscars or otherwise, or at least just open people more up to it. I know I was closed off to it for a long time because similarly, scared of things, or when an image, when I saw it, it was just so stuck in my head, it would recreate before bed or down the hall or whatever else. I'm like, there's no way I want to watch this. But I had a friend who had helped me with this podcast and magazine for years who just said, watch Blair Witch, watch Dragging Me to Hell, watch It Follows. And the more I started watching, the more I realized, oh, this is telling a much deeper story than just slash scream. And it does it in such an interesting way that I hope, to your point, you're able to do more horror films and get more out there, because I think, at least from my friends, it seems to be growing with easier to access Jordan Peele movies or Megan or things that are on the border of horror that get people more interested in the genre.
Great stuff to dip their toes into.
Yeah. Who do you think is on your Mount Rushmore of horror directors right now, or horror films?
I know a lot of people single him out. It's really easy to, but Robert Eggers, obviously, he's killing it. Absolutely.
Yep.
Zach Krieger, who did Barbarian, he's only done one movie, but I know he's doing another one right now. I can't wait to see what comes out. And even classics, you got John Carpenter.
Yeah.
You got David Cronenberg. There's so many people you can pull from everywhere you look.
Yeah, I was going to say, when it comes to female directors in horror, I was trying to pull a list together the other day. There doesn't seem to be a ton in my mind that stuck out. Are there any female directors or female-led horror movies that you really like?
The female-led horror movie list is endless. You got so many final girls out there.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the biggest trope in the world. You're Next, not female-directed, but I'm trying to think of some immediately coming to mind female horror directors. There's been a lot this past year. I believe that there was a Shudder movie called Birth Rebirth that was really interesting, female directed. I'm drawing a blank for the most part, but I promise you, like this the past 2 years, if you look into horror movies, there's been so many female-led horror movies, female-directed horror movies that are well worth your time.
And that's good to see it growing, definitely.
In the modern age, like especially, I think there's now and in the future, we're going to see a sea change of people who haven't really had the chance to have their voices amplified. And I think that as terrible as the machine can be, like the giant media machine of like pushing things out, I think the media machine is noticing that sort of thing is popular now. And while it can be weird to see the media machine finding things popular and putting so much stock into them, I think there are times where they get it right. And we're in the beginning of one of those phases right now.
That's inspiring, and that's good to hear. Good to know that there is some positive change continuing and that we're on the right track there. Last question before we go. Where do you see yourself in 5 years and 10 years with your production company, or if you're doing more features or television or limited series, what does that look like for you?
In 5 years, I'd love to see myself just shooting features full time, whether it's through my company or for other people. The absolute dream would be to shoot like between $1 to $5 million, $5 to $10 million features for the rest of my life. I'm not looking to be a person who they're like, oh, Lakota Ruby-Eck, he's an amazing cinematographer or anything. Yeah. It's like, I just want to do what I love for a living and enjoy every moment of it. I think that it's really rare that you can have a job that, while it is still a job, that you absolutely love what you're doing. And I think film it's such a privilege to be able to do this as a career. Yeah. Like it's so much fun. You meet so many new people. You do so many weird things. I've been on set so many times where I'm just like, how did I end up here? This is so weird, but I'm also so glad that I did it. So I hope I have more experiences like that in the next coming years and for the rest of my life as much as I can.
I hope so as well, and I hope everyone listening has learned a little bit about cinematography as well as taken some from your story and your experiences of getting started, what to learn, what to do, how to dig into the medium. I took that note down. I'll put the link for Shot Deck into the show notes as well as your website. Is there anything else or anyone else you're trying to call out as far as current work or things people should check out?
On, I think it was Wednesday. It was either Tuesday or Wednesday. A horror feature I actually shot, it had gotten distribution and it's released online if anyone wants to go see it. It's called Earworm. It's available on Amazon and Apple TV, available to rent, produced by Dirty Sweater Pictures. It's Dirty Sweater Productions. It's a local production company that's been making low budget stuff for years, but even though it's got a low budget, it feels like a much higher budgeted movie. A lot of people really put their heart and soul into it. So I think number one, like, keep an eye out for that. And pretty much I always have there's always a short coming out every month pretty much that I've shot. So keep your eyes out for those as well.
Awesome. I'll make sure to link your Instagram for those who want to follow you there. And then I'll put a link to Earworm on Prime or Apple TV.
Awesome.
Thanks again, Lakota. And we'll have to catch up with you again soon.
Absolutely. I hope you have a great day, man.
You too. All right, let's wrap up Hot Monkey Boy Summer. Let's talk about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes.
I liked it. What can I say? It's good. It's a good movie.
You were able to look beyond the number of ofs in the title, so that's a good start.
Yeah. There is a lot of ofs. I think at this point they're committed to the whole something of the Planet of the Apes, naming scheme. Yeah. But when they began 10 years ago, maybe they should have considered it from different, like that it's a mouthful.
I just wonder if it was a marketing SEO tactic. Like, if you're going to search Planet of the Apes, ours is going to come up all over the place. It's just every single movie is going to be more Planet of the Apes. Or if someone was like, you know what, though? I know there's an old Planet of the Apes trilogy, but this is the Planet of the Apes quoted trilogy. Now it's going to be Saga, whatever. Anyway, it was a good one. Where does it rank? Let's just start there. Where does it rank within the other three?
This one, I don't know. I think I liked it more than War for the Planet of the Apes. Maybe, a combo of, like, I just liked that it was warmer. There were, it was green versus the other ones were set in like fog and snow and stuff. And so I think I like the setting a lot more. And I think the time jump lent itself to, a different type of storytelling. Yeah, absolutely. I think the time jump, like I said, lends itself really well to a different kind of approach to the storytelling rather than being fixed on our main character of Caesar. We get to explore what the world looks like a little bit more as, humans are no longer the dominant species on the planet. And yeah. Okay. So my favorite is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and then Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, and then War for the Planet of the Apes, and then Rise of the Planet of the Apes.
Okay, so a solid number 2 out of 4. That's pretty good. I think what's interesting with this one, I would probably put it to, well, it's like almost more of a tie, but I think I still liked it as, second best. war is still a little too stuck in the POW camp for me. I will say it's a great movie about the stories that we hold dear and create messiah stories out of, or godlike reverence and legend. Because, yeah, the time jump definitely allowed for different world building, but there was so much of it, at least to me, that I didn't like at first. I didn't like how much of it was still in reference to Caesar the whole way through until it dawned on me, or I guess rose to mind, that they're trying to make this clear that the next 3 to 6 films are going to keep referencing back to Caesar, and the story is building and building to a religious like reverence, a Messiah figure, a Jesus figure, a prophet.
Yeah.
You have apes with different levels of understanding. Some tribes who don't even know about it, they're not taught about it. You have Caesar's window from that little San Francisco house
Hmm.
that's being used as an image. By the way, whoever did the set design for that first movie, I don't know if they have any idea this was going to be the symbol, but that window, good job on the window design.
Good job, set designers.
Good job. But yeah, I did like with the building of a legend, I think it could have been a little faster, a little different, or play with some different themes here or there. But I think overall, it still was a fun movie. I don't think it was perfect, but I enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, no, not perfect at all. I thought some highlights for me were, I think the scene where they go to I want to say is it the Griffith Observatory?
Yeah, it's Griffith. Yep.
Yeah, and they look through the telescope out to space. I thought that was really well done, especially because they didn't show us what they saw.
Oh,
And
I've been
so,
running.
yeah, part of me is just like, oh, they just saw stars and they're just like, whoa, oh my gosh, because they're apes and they're charting the progress of like human development, and to be able to like look out and see like the moon or the stars or something, it would be like, oh my gosh, maybe they saw something different.
I have been waiting to talk to you about this since we saw the movie. Because, okay, amateur astronomer is even too far of a term. I love the stars. I've been to observatories. I have telescopes. My grandpa worked at JPL, so he sent the Mars
Oh
rover
wow.
to Mars, the Saturn Cassini, all these different things. So I've always been like addicted to space and what's out there and
Wow.
all the different science behind it. I don't know with a telescope how you would see a moving object that far out. I don't know. But in my mind, I want to believe they're teasing this for the spaceship that left in. Darn, I've already
The
forgotten.
first one.
The first one, thank you. The spaceship that left in the first Planet of the Apes movie and was all over the newspapers. They mentioned it in the TV a couple times, and then we haven't heard about it. I'm wondering, is that's what is coming back right now? Are they going to like finally come back in time and land? Who knows? But it's going to be a huge jump if that's going to be what they actually saw in the telescope.
Yeah, I think I could see that could be a potential, like a possibility. But you're right. A telescope that is super old, like that one, that isn't moving. How are you tracking a lost derelict rocket in space? And so like for me, I don't know if that's what they saw. I personally like I think this would be jumping the shark. I This would definitely be jumping the shark and would be not the right move. But if it was aliens,
Battle for the Planet of the Apes. They're just battling laser reptilians.
yeah, battle Los Angeles, but it's actually just the apes versus the grays.
If they're bringing GI Joe and Transformers together, you know
You're
what?
right. You're
Who
right. Might
knows?
as well. But no, I think obviously they tease it at the end. The story of the conflict between humans and apes is not over yet.
Yeah.
Because there are groups of humans still living on Earth in like fallout shelters, basically underground, because they don't want to get infected with the virus that is making humans dumb. There's some amount of humans that have some kind of an immunity to that, because our main character Nova, what was her name in the movie? I know the orangutan called her Nova, but she was lingual. She spoke. She wasn't dumb, and her mission was to try and get this like, I don't know, computer code sequence thing, so that the humans in this bunker could reestablish communication with other humans on the planet. And I think that the entire I thought that was a good storytelling device. The entire movie was, oh, humans are now just like dumb creatures, except for a couple of them, have the ability to like talk. And the apes are the dominant species on the planet. And then at the very end, it's like, oh no, there are pockets of advanced humans still living on the Earth.
Yeah, and I do love the idea that they're hiding in bunkers, which I will say this. A lot of people, all right, we're going to go there. Maybe some folks who might vote a little more towards conservative issues are often talking about the wealthy folks have bunkers. They all know what's coming. They're building bunkers. Every single time a new bunker or just a large house with a giant basement is being built anywhere, it's in the news, right? Oprah, Zuckerberg, actors, whatever. It's interesting that Hollywood and conspiracy intertwine because one kind of informs the other, and it's only one way in my mind. I believe that it's people see it on screen after it's been talked about in some circle where the writer would write about it, and then folks at home are like, "Oh, Hollywood's teasing us. This is what they're actually doing." Anyway, I love the idea that the people in the bunkers are those who just don't get infected to lose speech and turn ape-like. But they're not actively going out and raiding parties from what we've seen so far. They're also not saving the humans out there that don't know English and can't speak. There's a full disconnect of like, it's different, it's hiding, it's tucked away. But I will say that Nova, or her, by her real name, May, M-A-E,
May, yeah.
she's the bad guy, right? Not even
Yeah.
the anti-hero. I don't even know if we'd say that. I think she is the
She,
bad guy at the end.
an antagonist, like an unknowing, like we didn't realize what her motives were. And with these movies, it's so weird because as humans, we want to be on the side of the humans, but it's so obvious that the apes, there's good apes and bad apes, but that the apes are doing a better job of being human than the humans are.
Yeah.
And so when we have a character like May, whose true motives are, to help reestablish humans as the dominant species on Earth, I don't really know how to feel about that.
Yeah. There's a different movie that's just not as good, but that I do enjoy. I, Robot from 2004, Will Smith.
Yes.
There's this question 20 years ago about humans and robots and AI and where do we fit? And if we're always supposed to be on top, then we have to subjugate the robots. We have to push them out. But at the end of that movie, spoiler for those who haven't seen this 20-year-old movie, at the end of the movie, it leaves one giant question of, but what if progressive coexistence was there and then what would happen? And, are you ready for that? Where the Planet of the Apes movies really push past that of, in many ways, we regress, they progress. What do we do as humans? Yeah, do we allow it? Do we then work in harmony and coexistence? Or like these movies are starting to prove, it's Woody Harrelson bomb them to Kingdom Come or Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Or as we're seeing here, May's like, you just can't have it because we don't trust you. You're not human. You're not allowed to have our technology. I'd rather kill as many apes that are in that bunker than let you have the ability to hurt or kill us. So a little bit of gray area that I do like.
Yeah. What do you think about the king figure? What was his name?
Proximus Caesar.
Proximus Caesar.
This is one of my issues. He was a good character written for the most part. There were some moments where it was like a little too kitschy or like a little too tropey for me. But I think it was good that they spelled out that he was trying to tell our new young protagonist humans are not to be trusted. Poor little Noah were running around. Also, the biblical names are fun. Noah, okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Poor little Noah running around just wanting to trust this human and learning more about his own world. And Proximus does have not compassion, but he like wants to clear out the ignorance and say, hey, you cannot trust a human, even if you like her. You just cannot trust a human. And in the end, he is right. May had to do what she had to do, but we see in that final scene, she doesn't trust him either. So there's this moment of Noah had to have met Proximus, and Proximus had to have this characteristic or this personality to help him be more benevolent at the end. But what did you think? Were you a fan of how he was portrayed?
Yeah, I thought it was, it's hard to say that he was a villain, right? Obviously,
Yeah.
like taking your peers and putting them in labor camps. And I thought it was funny that this is the second Planet of the Apes movie in a row that other apes are subjugating apes for labor camps, essentially.
Yeah.
Like they don't have any other ideas beyond that. That is their one idea. But I like the idea that language and literature is one of the greatest inventions of the human world.
Yeah.
And the apes don't have literature. They have language, but they don't have literature. Like they don't read. And so Proximus needed humans who knew how to read to translate our mythology to him so that he could use our mythology for his betterment. And so then I thought that was really cool with May, where she was like, there's maybe a book in there that can help the other humans learn how to talk. And have you seen the Book of Eli?
Yeah.
That one, yeah, with Denzel Washington. It's like, oh, the last Bible on Earth needs to be translated so that post-apocalyptic humans can have the Bible again. And so my ears were ringing. I was like, oh, is she talking about the Bible? Like, why would a Bible be in a bunker? But no, it was like it was like children's books in there. And I thought to have the apes stumble across a child's book that was depicting a zoo with the apes in a cage, I was like, oh, this is really good. This is really good stuff.
Let's just talk about ourselves for a second. If we stumbled across some old cave paintings or carvings that really shook up the status quo of what we believe we came from, it would cause problems, right?
It would cause problems.
Or rather, it does when this happens. They just discovered some tools recently and some carvings that prove that humans were in North America 27,000 years ago, predating us well before the Bering Strait and the land bridge and everything else.
Which is so hilarious because if you were to ask the indigenous peoples of northern Canada how long they've been here in America, they'll quote to you 30,000 years. And so it's like the people who have been here know how long they've been here. It's just like, it's just our bookish Western minds are like, no, not until we have proof are we going to accept what you have to say.
Our Western religious amnesia, we're like, but how does that work with Hebraic poetry that's been retranslated? Yeah. I'm seeing this in the Planet of the Apes movies, and I love it because I love the idea that Noah and his friends are now going to have this knowledge and possibly bring it back, or at least can tell other people, we saw in books what was depicted. Apes may have been in cages. And I did love the character of Rocco, which we'll talk about more, as this, prophet figure living out in the forest of Los Angeles. But he also breaks down some of Noah's preconceived notions of like, no, ape has always been this, human has always been dumb. And he's like, nah, the rumor is humans used to subjugate us, or they used to fly in the skies like a bird. I love that it's going to start some factions of ape mythology and where do we come from and where do humans belong, because I know that's going to be a big fight, like you said, in the second and third movie of this trilogy.
Yeah. And you know what? Is that guy dead? I doubt it, because being swept away by a river does not mean you're just dead.
Yeah, I was wishing they would have shown something more about it.
They're probably just keeping their options open. If he becomes a useful storytelling device in the next one, then they can bring him back. But if not, then I guess he's dead.
Yeah. Yep. How'd you feel about William H. Macy's character, Trevathan?
Good. It's hard to say that any one person is villainous in this movie, right? Like he's just a human who's trying to make it work in a world that is not designed for him anymore. And like, would I have done something similar? Like probably, if I knew how to read and I had given up hope that humans could become the dominant species on Earth again, would I just be like, I'm going to make as comfortable a life as I can? And that means reading these tales to Proximus Caesar.
Yeah, he did a good job, especially because he plays a really good wormy character from Fargo and Jurassic Park 3, and then some may say that about Shameless or whatever else. He just plays a genuine, timid character. I enjoyed him. I enjoyed the part he played. I also thought it was more realistic, like you're saying, if there would be someone that maybe it's not nefarious, but it is just self-preservation, which is not too dissimilar from what May was doing, of acting like she couldn't speak at first. Okay, we can speak. I'll go with you. Okay, we're not letting the apes have this tech. I do want to bring up names and how they're written, and I have to laugh because as one who's dabbling in screenwriting, I get this. But Trevathan means keeper of the gate, gatekeeper. He's literally the gatekeeper for Proximus and the Apes. He's the one that could read English. He is a gatekeeper of all the books. And then Proximus being from the Latin word proxima, just the closest.
Yeah.
So the closest to Caesar. I think it's fun, although a little bit silly when you look it up and you're like, oh, it's just that. It's just the literal meaning of what this character is. But it was fun because I like the idea of someone taking on the name Caesar, where I don't think Noah will, but maybe it will become an honorific and we see Caesar again through the trilogy, or a new Caesar.
Yeah. Yeah. The one weird thing that was like when the water started coming in, it felt like there was too much water in that bunker. Am I right?
I'm not an oceanographer or whatever you want to call. I don't know how quickly water flows into a space like that, but as one who's built many a sandcastle and stuff, I think it takes a while.
Yeah. I guess it's more just like the whatever dam that they had erected to try and get into, like, it wasn't more than like 15 or 20, like 15 feet high. Like, it wasn't that visually big, and water isn't going to rush into a place. I feel like water can rush into a place quickly.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's not going to raise higher than the level of the ocean. And it felt like that's what it was doing in the bunker.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that.
I would love to have a scientist on, because there's all kinds of different tricks of displacing water with a straw or something else. You change the pressure.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I don't believe the bunker would become a squeegee or a sponge and just immediately take all the water up like a tube. But that might just be my lack of knowledge. Scientists, write in.
Write in, scientists.
Water displacement?
Prove us wrong.
Prove us wrong. Overall, a good one. Yet not number one in my book. There were some moments where I wished it was more of a Stranger Things-esque, E.T.-esque, teen apes learning about stuff and having fun, the three of them, where I think it like jumped out of that pretty quickly to discover the Jesus figure, free the slaves, kill the bad guy.
Yes.
Maybe they just wanted to cover all that ground to start the next movie on a different page. Who knows? But I'll give it credit where it's credit's due. It was a fun movie. It was great. Liked it more than I didn't like it.
And I'm excited to see what happens next. I don't know. What do you think are some names for it? We've had Kingdom, we've had Dawn, we've had Rise, we've had War. What are we gonna like? Afternoon of the Planet of the Apes? What are some other Civilization of the Planet of the Apes?
Codification of the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Civilization. See, there you go.
Civilization. The University of the Planet of the Apes. I think that'd be cool to do like a Varsity Blues ripoff.
Yeah, that could be fun.
The Planet of the Apes.
Maybe drawing from Lauryn Hill, the Miseducation of the Planet of the Apes.
Hey, that's cool. Yeah.
I just feel like Battle has to be the third of this trilogy.
Yeah, that one seems like it's, if we've had War, we should have Battle.
And then End has to be the last three. Who knows? But you know what? If aliens are coming, that's at least got to take 2 movies, if not 3. So
you're right. You're right. That's got to take a few.
Yep.
Thanks for listening to us today, and we'll be back next week with another episode from our Aliens in America series and more interviews.
Until then, watch good TV and movies.